It's really important that when we have conversations like this, they're rooted in fact. I know you don't want to hear this because the truth burns. It was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? That's slander. Hopefully this will bless your life and change it.
Last Friday, I had just finished shooting a show in Oakland, California, and learned of the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like so many other times this year, the tragic recent passing of my Aunt Brenda, the death of John Lewis, Elijah Cummings, and Reverend C.T. Vivian, grief hit me. I sat with the deaths for a little while, as I did with the 200,000 COVID deaths. And then I thought, this is war, and they don't play fair. Not the Civil War or any of the world wars, but an epic battle because Donald Trump was already tweeting about his plans to nominate her successor on the day of her death. Feeling apprehensive and frankly hopeless, I wanted to sink into my floor and not get up like I felt the night of the 2016 election. But thank God, stubbornness runs in my veins, a little more than despair. So I posted a tribute, partially to hold myself accountable. The post is the only picture I have with RBG. I never take pictures, not even with folks I really admire, trying to protect their space, but someone pushed me that day, and I'm so glad she did. I said, RBG, this fight is dedicated to you, and it shall be. I'm sure many folks wondered why, and still many others are curious about why so many of us, especially women, are focusing on the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, more than just the grief, but also on her impact. Over the course of her 27-year career on the bench, she became known as the Great Dissenter. Before joining the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a robust legal career, winning 6 of the 7 cases she argued before the court herself. As a Supreme Court justice, RBG was an ally in several pivotal decisions, which impacted women's rights, discrimination, environmental justice, health care, immigration, LGBT rights, and criminal justice reform. A few of the cases where she played a pivotal role in the decision include the 1997 case of United States versus Virginia, where RBG wrote a dissenting opinion that served as a momentous milestone for women's rights and university admission policies. The Virginia Military Institute barred women from attending. RBG saw the BS and said, hell nah, she ain't having it. In the case of Shelby versus Holder in 2013, where the majority opinion gutted key protections in the Voting Rights Act, she so artfully stated in the 5-4 dissenting opinion, throwing out case of Shelby versus Holder in 2013, where the majority opinion gutted key protections in the Voting Rights Act, and where she so artfully stated in the 5-4 dissenting opinion, throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. And further, correctly argued that Congress carried the power to enforce the 14th and the 15th Amendments. For example, Dred Scott versus Sanford. Dred Scott was an enslaved man who sued his master's widow for his freedom on the grounds that he had lived as a resident of a free state and territory. The Supreme Court ruled that Americans of African descent, whether free or enslaved, were not American citizens and could not sue in federal court. The court also ruled that Congress lacked the power to ban slavery in U.S. territories. No wonder these fools want to hold on to the vestiges of slavery that is the Electoral College, where enslaved people were counted as 3/5, but their votes weren't. Side notes, don't you think the ancestors want us to show up and be counted as fully human? In 1842, there was Prigg versus Pennsylvania, where the court ruled that the Fugitive Slave Act, which required that the enslaved were to be returned to their owners, was indeed constitutional, even if they were in a free state. Also, consider Plessy versus Ferguson, the very case that made segregation the official law of the land with the separate but equal policy, which really meant separate and unequal. Only one justice, John Marshall Harlan, the former slave-holding Attorney General of Kentucky, who also opposed civil rights for free blacks, I might add, argued in his dissenting opinion that the arbitrary separation of citizens on the basis of race while they are on a public highway is a badge of servitude wholly inconsistent with the civil freedom and the equality before the law established by the Constitution. Imagine that. What if we had more allies on that bench? Dred Scott and many others could have died free and truly liberated people. And then came along Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously that segregation of children in school was unconstitutional thanks to the amazing legal genius of Thurgood Marshall and his team. Folks, there are also cases like that of the hanging Chad, the presidential election dispute of Bush v. Gore back in 2000. The Supreme Court reversed Florida's request for a ballot recount. Thanks to Florida and the decision by the court, George Bush became president. Grutter versus Bollinger, this 2003 case of affirmative action at Michigan Law School, which confirmed that the school's use of critical mass for diversity was indeed constitutional, even as we know that affirmative action policy is severely threatened given the Trump administration. And of course, there is the 2013 case that you all have already heard about, Shelby versus Holder, which we know virtually decimated the Voting Rights Act of 1965, where they deemed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 as unconstitutional. We're now in 2020 and see more than enough tactics being used to suppress the votes of Black and brown people now that there is no preclearance provision. Healthcare, reproductive rights, the Muslim ban, and so many more make it clear that the Supreme Court is worth fighting for. Whether it's a decision about our freedom, our right to vote, educational opportunities, or even a fair election, the rulings of the Supreme Court dictate how we live in this country. It is imperative that we have justices that align with our values, particularly given the fact that the appointments to the court are lifelong. Now, why is RBG's death becoming political? Remember what I said about the importance of the Supreme Court? Our civil rights are determined by the courts and those who go to the ballot box. That's right, us. You and I have the ability to shape these courts. That is exactly why they don't want us to vote, so they can decide our rights. Let's take a step back and dive into a quick civics lesson so we can really unpack this and get on the same page. What is the Supreme Court? I told you how important it is, but why does it matter? It is the highest court in the United States. It's made up of 9 justices who hear cases and issue opinions. They have the final say on the law. Their rulings cannot be appealed. Ready? So there are 3 branches of the government. The legislative branch makes the laws. The House of Representatives and the Senate, which collectively make up the United States Congress, declare war, regulate interstate and foreign commerce, dictate how high or low taxes will be, and determine government spending, period. The Senate also confirms federal judges. Then there's the executive branch. They carry out and enforce the law through the president, his cabinet, and federal agencies. And finally, the judicial branch. Well, they decide the meaning of laws, how to apply them to different situations, and whether a law violates the Constitution. What about the Senate process? A lot of us have been hearing a lot more about that lately. Well, the Constitution in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, has the Appointments Clause, and it states, "The President shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint judges of the Supreme Court." The Senate should advise and consent. There should be a thorough vetting, background check, and hearing process to confirm the next Supreme Court nominee. But Trump and McConnell want nothing more than to rush the nomination of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement. And why is that? Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, and the Senate GOP would love nothing more than to erase her legacy and will stop at nothing for a 6-3 conservative majority in the Supreme Court. Yes, it is absolutely bad right now, but it can absolutely get worse. And I'm not trying to see worse at all. Rushing the nominations process is not just unfair, it just ain't right. Donald Trump has been able to get 216 judicial nominees confirmed throughout his 4 years as president. At that pace, and if reelected, he is on track to significantly crush Barack Obama's 8-year confirmation number of 334 judicial appointments because Mitch McConnell didn't want to make him just a one-term president. He also wanted to hamper his impact with the courts. They determine the trajectory of so many things in our lives. Now that Donald Trump appointed a ton of judges, This ain't looking too good, y'all. Seriously. Again, these are lifetime appointments. Whatever happened to no confirmations of Supreme Court justices in an election year? Do y'all remember when Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell said if a vacancy occurs during an election, what should actually happen? Here it is if you don't.
The decision the Senate announced weeks ago remains about a principle and not a person. About a principle and not a person. The Senate will appropriately revisit the matter when it considers the qualifications of the nominee the next president nominates, whoever that might be.
This is the last year of a lame duck president, and if Ted Cruz or Donald Trump get to be president, they've all asked us not to confirm or take up a selection by President Obama. So if a vacancy occurs in their last year of their first term, guess what? You will use their words against them. I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me, and you'd be absolutely right. We're setting a precedent here today. Republicans are.
Listen, those are Lindsey Graham's words, not mine. This came right after President Obama nominated Merrick Garland on March 16, 2016, for Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States to succeed Antonin Scalia. They stalled the confirmation process for 293 days. Keep in mind that this was during the primary election in March of 2016, not anywhere near the general election like we are now. The average time from nomination to hearing for a Supreme Court justice since 1975 has been about 40 days. The average time for a Supreme Court nominee to move from nomination to confirmation is 67 days. Fast forward to 2020. The election is just a little over a month away. Y'all do know people have already started voting, right? I hope some of you have. One might ask, what are the current options for a replacement? Well, the Trump administration will either A, rush to get an appointee confirmed before the election. Senator Graham is already claiming that they have the Republican votes necessary to confirm this Supreme Court nominee. B, they'll try to confirm the nominee during the lame duck session, which is when Congress, with either chamber, reconvenes in an even-numbered year following the November elections to consider various items. Some lawmakers who return then will not be in the next Congress. Senator John Cornyn of Texas told CNN that Senate Republicans would confirm Trump's Supreme Court nominee in a lame duck session, even if Biden wins the November election. So some of you may say, is there any hope? And some of you may even ask, can Democrats do anything? And what are the Democrats going to do? I can't tell you what they're going to do, but I can definitely tell you what they need to do. The first thing they should do is sue Mitch McConnell. Yes, sue him. In 2016, Mitch McConnell did not find it appropriate to confirm judges during an election, a primary election, as you heard already. So of course, he doesn't think there should be a confirmation during the general election, right? Wrong. He's actually going in the complete opposite direction. This type of unfairness in the process must be challenged in the courts. Come on, Democrats, it's time to play to win, because these fools don't even play fair. The other thing that Democrats can do is impeach Donald Trump. Yes, again. And should I even have to say why? From foreign interference in elections in 2016, 2018, and 2020, new tax crimes alleged by the Manhattan District Attorney, emoluments violations, ethics violations, and Hatch Act violations, the bottom line is, let's take a look back. What do you think would have happened if Barack Obama would have done half, a fourth, an eighth, a 1,000th of what Donald Trump has done in office? Exactly. They could also impeach the Department of Injustice leader, Attorney General Barr. Oh, and what about Brett Kavanaugh? Because he was never properly vetted and that FBI investigation was a sham. Problem is that all the impeachment talk starts in the House of Representatives. But truly, all of Trump's judicial picks are garbage, and that is slang for trash. Side note, do you know the demographics of Donald Trump's 216 judicial picks? mostly all white, male, and really unqualified. Oh, he does have one Latina appeals court judge and not one single black appellate judge. What in the hell do we have to lose? Clearly the courts. We could also threaten to get statehood for DC and Puerto Rico. The House already passed a bill in favor of DC statehood in June, and there are more than 700,000 Americans in DC. There are more than 3 million in Puerto Rico. No Senate representation, no vote on the House floor, and this should not even be a partisan threat, but it is, and we know exactly why. Just look at the demographics. Joe Biden should commit to acting on both of these in his first 30 days in office. The other thing that could be done, the fourth and final thing, is expand the courts. There have been 9 judges on the Supreme Court since 1869. FDR tried to increase the number to ensure support for the New Deal, but he failed. According to a September Marquette University poll, 61% of Democrats favor or strongly favor increasing the number of Supreme Court justices. Now, the truth is, RBG did oppose this tactic, but it must be considered if and only if 2020 Mitch McConnell can't play by 2016 Mitch McConnell's own rules. And since we're changing rules, maybe it should apply to the circuit courts as well. Regardless of where we land here, the courts have become too political under GOP rule, and it started with the failure of the Senate to nominate Merrick Garland. Clearly, we don't have a lot of options pre-election, but this is why our votes matter so much. It's not just democracy that's at stake. It's every civil and human rights advancement made in modern history and solidified by the Supreme Court that's at stake. Elections have consequences. Republicans appointed 14 of the last 18 judges. Imagine how things could shift if we all mobilized around voting and accountability. Don't ever let them tell you that your vote doesn't matter. And I almost forgot. There's a third option for confirming RBG's replacement, and it was her dying wish. The GOP could comply with what they forced Democrats to do in 2016, and that's wait until inauguration. If everything goes well, Joe Biden will become president with the first ever black woman vice president, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden's pick matters because he guaranteed a black woman nominee for the Supreme Court. And what about you? Are you registered to vote? Do you recognize how much power is in your discipline, the value in your vote? Please go to the polls or the ballot box to drop off your ballot. And you know I'm gonna keep it real with y'all. If you have no other reason to show up for this election, do it for black women, at least 2 of them, for Kamala and Biden's Supreme Court nominee. Do your part and elect justice. Your voice and vote matters. Ruth, this fight is for you.
To make a correction.
All right.
And it's about the most remarkable Thurgood Marshall. Yes, I copied his technique in trying to bring the courts, to educate the court, take them one step at a time to the ultimate goal. But Thurgood Marshall, in his lawyering days, when he got up in the morning in a southern town, he didn't know he would be alive at the end of that day. My life was never threatened, so there is an enormous difference. Still, when he argued cases and would say to courts, separate but equal is not before the court today. These facilities are unequal. And when he had a sufficient number of building blocks, then he made the argument separating children, forced separation of children by race in school can never be equal. So that notion of leading the court to where you want them to go, but taking them, not attempting to take a giant step, but taking them there, one short step at a time. That was his technique, and it was a winning one, and we copied it.